I tell people all the time that I am incredibly lucky to have found Widow Jane as kind of the starting point for me in the career, because I've not ever, I have, but I've not in the same way, I think, had to really think about the minority that, that females are in the industry, that women, are in the industry, because I've always had, at least in positions of power around me, a team of really amazing, engaged women.
Welcome to another episode of the Whiskey Lifestyles Women in Whiskey series. I am your host, Rashawn Hall. I have a great episode for you planned today. We're going from my basement here in New Jersey via the internet to Brooklyn to the Widow Jane Distillery, where we are going to talk to their current head distiller, Sienna Jevremov, who has been with the brand for quite some time. It sounds like, we'll get a little bit into that and her background. So welcome in, Sienna. How are you?
Hello. I am well. Thank you. How are you?
Good. Thank you for doing this. Let's just, I guess to start off, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into the whiskey space.
Sure. So I'll get it out of the way. Yeah, I'm from England originally, but have lived in Brooklyn for about 21 years now. So my accent is all over the place. I apologize in advance, but I get a lot of Australian, which apparently seems to be the weird hybrid. But yeah, I moved here with my family, and have just always lived in Brooklyn. And I've lived in this area for a really long time, not specifically Red Hook, but Carroll Gardens around, and went to school here and things like that. And I've always wanted to take a creative path, was kind of my dream, something that involved some sort of kind of creative output, something that you were putting something into the world for others to see and understand and kind of get the expression of who you are and what you're trying to say. And I kind of, having a big older brother who was going into film, kind of saw that and was like, I would love to go into film too. So I started studying film, but meanwhile, I rode past Widow Jane when it was still Cacao Prieto, the chocolate factory, beginnings of a rum distillery starting, and I saw they had like a help wanted sign, and I knew I needed a job while I was in college, so I stopped by and I was like, hey, how do I do this? Like, knocked on the door, like, how does this work? This still happens to this day, people just coming up to our door, hello. And so they said apply, and I applied. I met, and they were like, oh yeah, we got one other person. And I was like, sure. Like 10 minutes later, got a call and they were like, oh yeah, you got the job. And the job basically was to sell whiskey and chocolate, full beans to bar chocolate and whiskey on the weekends. Little did I know I would be the only person working the weekends, and it would just kind of really be me by myself. And I kind of fell in love with this idea of engaging with people about this kind of shared thing we were learning about together, because I basically did loads of research, my own education. I'd always had, at this point I was still in college, so I wasn't drinking a lot, but I was kind of starting to learn. And I, obviously being from Europe, I had, we started a lot younger, so I had a little bit of an appreciation for spirits already, and just food and flavor and everything like that. Always have been a baker, and so it was just amazing. Kind of, I didn't realize there was this like real culture and tradition around spirit making and spirits. I knew there was around drinking and bartending and cocktails and things like that. The craft cocktail scene was really starting up there, but I didn't realize there was so much culture around like how it was made, other than potentially like I knew about vineyards and things like that, but that was a far off French or Italian thing. And yeah, I just fell in love with learning about that, and it was kind of really awesome doing that. And then I just learned everything, jack of all trades. I did all the tours. I started helping her out around everything. I've hand labeled everything. I've helped make weird inventive concoctions, helped hand harvest corn, helped all sorts of things. And then when Lisa Wicker, who was the previous president and head distiller, came on, she was looking to grow and kind of grow and improve the in-house distillation team. And she was like, well, you might not have, the storied history of distilling or brewing or anything like that, but we talk about bread and yeast and like food science all the time. But then we talk about, how important it is to like clean things properly. All of these things make you a really good distiller, being kind of conscientious and stuff. And I see that would be useful. And we can teach the other stuff as it goes along. And so I started apprenticing and very quickly kind of got my footholds in, and then took over the distillation program. And then when she decided she wanted to move on to move back to Kentucky and then pursue other things, she nominated me to really just fully take on the head distiller position, as well as elected me to be one of the blending team as well, which was kind of amazing that she saw that hope. And she was like, you know what's wrong with the taste and smell of distillate when it's coming off the still before it even gets in the still. That's going to be really invaluable to the team. But also I know you love a drink, and I know you know Widow Jane like the back of your hand. But I also know that you love to go out there and try other things, and you've had the chance to at all these whiskey events. So I think you'd be a trusted source. And she's also had quite a few of my cakes. So I think hopefully that also, my flavors there also, my baking skills also won her over is what I'm hoping.
Okay. And what was that like, I guess, or did you even at that time notice how, having this distiller position pass from one woman to another? Did you think about how unique that was? Has that ever crossed your mind, given this industry is typically not that there are not many women distillers, or, not nearly as many as there are men, obviously. So, did you ever think about that kind of passing of the torch and what that meant?
Yeah, I mean, I tell people all the time that I am incredibly lucky to have found Widow Jane as kind of the starting point for me in the career, because I've not ever, I have, but I've not in the same way, I think, had to really think about the minority that, that females are in the industry, that women, are in an industry, because I've always had, at least in positions of power around me, a team of really amazing, engaged women. Michelle, who's now our vice president, she's only worked here a month longer than I have, so she's always been around. I saw her. We've had many, and we're such a small, tight kind of team. So everyone was just doing everything. They were doing it, and so there was never a really felt like no one ever was saying, "Oh, you can't do that because you're like this." Because frankly, if you worked here, you had to do everything. And I think we all understood that. And we really were facing that with people telling us, like, you're too young, you're too upstarty, you're a Yankee or whatever, you're not from Kentucky, you can't do this. So I think, sex was such a small thing to us already. But I definitely think that I can't imagine how different it would be. And I also, I'm just so happy. I mean, I can't imagine. And I'm so grateful. And it is kind of amazing to have had a head distiller kind of show me that, there's like nothing different, and see that, it is a route that is, of course, for us, why would it not be? Lisa was always very chill about it too. She was never making a big deal about it, but she also was very open and very clear about the fact that there's going to be really interesting situations that are going to arise from being a woman in this industry, and was always open to talking about that. And knowing you had someone there who was always going to understand that side of things, I think really, I think it just was lucky. It allowed me not to have to worry about it, and I could focus on the things that mattered, which was actually learning to do my job well. I didn't have to worry about, if someone was out of line or said something weird, or having to prove myself because there was some preconceived notion of me being a woman, not being capable. And so I think that's was really a blessing for sure.
And I didn't even consider, to your point, when you're talking about, Widow Jane coming into the broader whiskey space, not necessarily about, you all, women distilling the juice. It's, yes, it's in, you guys are in Brooklyn. and you're young and it's a new brand, et cetera, going up against more quote unquote traditional brands. That's a really interesting perspective. And having been with the brand for its, it just celebrated it, that you guys just celebrated your 10-year anniversary. What is it? What has that, seeing it from inception to now? What is it? What has that been like? I know it's a very broad question, but how is it? How has it felt to kind of been such a core part of this evolution of this brand that people see and know and love on their back bars and in their home bars now?
What I think it's really, really special because I've been able to really see, I've been able to be witness to the growth and blossoming of a company through the scrappy days to now, the beautiful things. I've been able to be witness to the things that weren't working, that weren't right, that, and things like that. And not as since my trajectory's kind of been like starting kind of on the lower of the rungs and working my way up to a somewhat managerial position, it's been amazing to see what really didn't work and was a terrible way to manage to operate, and being able to apply that and kind of be part of pointing us in the right direction, while also seeing how we were doing things so well to begin with. And I think also as we gotten bigger, we've had more tight relationships with bigger distilleries now, and so I've been able to go see them and to really see how we in some ways are so advanced and ahead in certain regards compared to them, or just on par with them, people who are churning out as much barrels as we could even think of putting out in a year in a couple of days, and have been around forever. But yeah, and it's also just really lovely to see the growth, to go from being kind of I'm not gonna hedge around it, but going from being a brand that was sort of seen in a kind of weird way, a little bit of love but a lot of hate, and a lot of a lot of odd feelings about us as like kind of a usurpers, or or just coming in and kind of trying to ride a wave, and seeing that kind of initial thing to people just generally saying, being able to come up to me and say like, oh, I do know you, I'm so excited to see you at this event. Like, I don't need to say, Widow Jane anymore. And people go, and then they go, Window Jane, and then having to go through this whole thing. But for them to be like, oh, I do know you. Wow. And like, I've heard this about this, and like be able to then like really explore with them and get really in the nitty gritty, and then be like, yeah, I remember who gave me this. Like, I can share, like, now this shared history. I don't know. It's just, I don't know if that really answers the question the way you want it to, but it's just been lovely to be able to really, as I said, the community that's around, and the culture, and this like, not, I wouldn't say familial vibes, but like this interwoven connection, community, I guess is the best way of putting it, that is around where whiskey and spirits and distilleries, and this kind of like shared thing where it's a shared thing between all the other people who make the whiskey, but also a shared thing between you and the consumer, and like the very personal ways they consume your whiskey and where and with who, and then you also how you're making it, and it's like how you can like mesh these all together and bond over them, and to be able to do that over like 10 years as like a growing thing is just, I don't know, so lucky for sure.
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. I mean, I think you talk about obviously being a newer brand compared to some of obviously, the more storied Kentucky brands, but at some point they were where you all were, and had those people who started on day one, who were working at the distillery, or who were early fans of the brand and kind of evolved with the brand. So I think that, that makes a tremendous amount of sense. And it also kind of leads me to, yes, I wasn't familiar with Widow Jane. We met a couple months back, but I was not familiar with the story and how much not only craft and care you all put into the liquid that you make, but where, the water source. And if you can just tell us a little bit about, which also ties back to the name of the brand, and kind of, my mind was blown when we went on that trip and on that excursion to kind of see the water source and how you all think about your whiskey from inception of the water on down. So we'd love for you to kind of share with our audience a little bit about that experience and kind of where the water comes.
Sure. So people have always been a little confused by the name Widow Jane. It's sort of dark, it's morbid, it's intriguing, but yeah, I mean, obviously it's got this catching power. And actually it comes from a folk name that is applied to a old limestone mine located in Rosendale, New York. New York. Don't know why I said that with. And so yeah, and so it's up there, and it is got a very long history. Source for limestone for a long time, but it was kind of an expensive process to get it out. And so it did factor into some amazing buildings and monuments in the city. But when Portland cement, which wasn't quite as naturally formed as the Rosendale stuff, started coming onto market, but was slightly cheaper to produce and make, it kind of faded that part of its life out. But then it kind of went through several cycles of other things, bomb shelters or proposed bomb shelters to fish farms, to mushroom farms, to all these different things. But it's just this kind of amazing man-made feat of these wonderful, massive cabins that go deep, deep into the ground and kind of are this source of really lovely water that's got a lot of character to it. It's rainwater, but it's also a little bit of spring water, and then it's also just filtered through layers and layers of sediment and just picking up kind of all that history that's there within the limestone itself. And when we were starting up as a company, we were looking to kind of figure out everything that was going to go into the bottle. We started getting the juice down. We knew we were going to get some whiskey from kind of the major players, Kentucky, from Tennessee, from Indiana. We wanted those, and as well as laying down our own stuff. And we were really obsessed with the corn that we were going to use for the base bourbon. But we also knew that bourbon would probably get released at a year, but that wasn't going to be the final formation of it. That wasn't going to be the final thing. It was going to be released much, much later. And so we were kind of focusing on that starting point. But then when it came to the sourcing of the whiskey, we were sourcing the whiskey and finding the locations and how those were going to be done and how we were going to treat them. But we also were like, well, we're going to be, when you look at the alcohol percentage on a bottle, it's telling you exactly how much alcohol to an extent is in there. And the rest of that is almost mostly water. So you've got this big, big important ingredient. What are we going to do? We're going to do RO? Are we going to do what, like the old guys? Yeah, the guys down there in Kentucky do RO. They sit on a bedlock of beautiful, beautiful limestone. But no, not all of them really use it in the end. They use it in the cook processes, or, it's part of the municipal water to an extent. How can we mimic that, but also make it more of a Widow Jane way, which is kind of really get into it. And we realized just not too far outside the city, about 2 hours at most, there is this old defunct limestone mine. So our own at the time kind of started making these connections up there, trying to kind of meet the guys who had access to the water and to pull it out. And after much, much schmoozing and kind of trying to win over the trust and say, we weren't going to just kind of come in and just take everything from them and just use them and forget them. We were able to meet the Turcos who we work with to pull the water out of the limestone mine. And it now becomes a kind of integral part of what we do. It's rich and flavorful, but it also just has this really great mouthfeel. And we just find that it just works wonders when paired with a whiskey, but also just really makes what we're doing a little bit extra special, really, at that, it transforms these ingredients that we're already getting and working with. I also use it in all of my pre-barrel proofing, so it's there on this kind of secondary layer. As to the name, it's kind of, as I said, it's this kind of folk story. It's actually known as the Rosendale Cement Mines, and there's multiple portions owned by different people. It's kind of the mines being broken up over the years by different private owners. But there is a portion that's the Historical Society still kind of owns and refers to it as the Widow Jane Mine, which comes from these many different women within the familial line. But as I was told the first time when I was going to become a tour guide, but one of the folk stories, and the one that kind of I loved the best, is that, they didn't really like the old owner of the mine. He was a bit of a, not a nice guy, a bit of a classic kind of Dickensian villain where he owned the place and just kind of controlled everyone, and was just kind of very mean and very demanding, owned all the bars. So all the money you made in the mine, he then would just get back when he was basically selling you booze and things like that. And so he then passed away, and to kind of remember, rather than really refer to anything under his name, which was still attached to all the businesses around, I realize I'm waving my hand, sorry. He decided to, the town decided they would rather refer to everything as the Widow Jane mine, the Widow Jane this, because they remembered his wife, who was just a generally much better, much sweeter, nicer, kinder person. So kind of in the long run, I like that story because it's this idea that, it didn't pay off to be as cruel as he was, even if it paid off in life. If he had a lot during life, it didn't really pay off in the end. He didn't have this lasting thing, and everyone still remembered her. So that was my favorite version of it. There's many different stories.
And I was gonna say you both you and Michelle, who's on the blending team with you, you guys are, having been there, are deep into this experience. Like, you guys know that these minds like the back of your hands. Like,
I know. I was watching Fallout the other day, and I was like, oh, this scene in this cave looks really familiar. And I was like, that is definitely the Widow Jane mine. And then we all came in and talked about it yesterday. And Michelle was like, yep, they shot it up there. And I was like, I knew it. I got like 10 seconds and there was like a bear in it. And I was still like, Widow Jane.
There you go. Yeah, you guys know those mines like the back of your hand. And I would say it is an impressive and beautiful sight to see. That also speaks to how collaboratively you all work on all of the things that you do. So talk a little bit about, you mentioned the blending team and Michelle, who was on that team as well, and how you all come together, obviously 3 different palettes, 3 different people, and coming together and making those decisions as you're blending products, and making those kind of, sensory decisions about what is going to go into them.
A lot of our products used to be blended kind of just by Lisa. She would take a lot of time, very specific things. But when she passed the gambit and passed it along to us, we took it as a 3-person team, and we worked really kind of closely that way. And I don't think I would do it any other way. It's really engaging and really interesting to be able to discuss and hash over, but also explore whiskey from all its facets and from its sides, especially when you're working a process where you're kind of blending some very, very different barrels, some very, very different components, or you're blending from oddly similar barrels, but with all these slight nuances. It really helps to have a team who, there's Michelle, there's myself, and then there's also Jacob, who's our bartender. So we all come from these different ways, where Michelle is, she didn't really start off kind of in the spirits world. And so she's coming from this palette of like, where she really approaches it from this really interesting realm. But she's also got this amazing kind of artistic mind, that kind of just sees, she sees the spirit as this kind of really as colors and shapes, and she like the way she approaches it in that kind of way, and kind of what she's looking for and things like that. But then we have Jacob, who like tastes the spirit, and he knows what he likes in his glass. He knows his love, his appreciation, that, but he also knows what other people would want. He also knows how it will work in a cocktail. He can also see it, all of these other great, the consumer he's, greatly tied to. And then there's me, who just, knows where the whiskey's coming from, but also knows what, I know what I like to taste. I know what flavors are. I know what's interesting. I feel, strongly on that. And so it's lovely to be able to kind of bounce off each other, because we each have these different aspects and kind of build something that will be completely, approved by so many different palates, so many different walks of life, so many different things. You can really be assured that you're making kind of the right choice. But on that front, it also allows you some freedom and fun, because we have these very specific things we're looking for when it comes to different products we're blending, because we're aiming for some consistency. So we have these things. But it also allows us to have we allow each other to have fun. So we blend kind of independently, but then we'll go to each other to make sure that we're staying within the wheelhouse, but also allow us to like talk through why we made some choices with a blend, why we made some choices with a recipe, and kind of like have it be this conversation, so that we can like either say, oh, that doesn't really make any sense, or I see what you mean, and then it can reassure you that you're not going completely bonkers and you're making the right choices. And so it's just a really fun experience to kind of have these facets. I also think it really helps because we all just in general have very different palates and tastes. You know, I'm not a massive sweet tooth. I like savory, I like funky, I love spicy. Michelle likes, you know, she likes sweet, but she also likes a little bit of that spice too. And then Jacob really loves sweet and smooth, and things like that. And so having this kind of great scheme allows us to work together to kind of balance each other out and find that kind of middle ground. It also helps us keep ourselves at a really small, you know, blending scale. We can still keep our recipes 5 barrels a piece, or maybe a little bigger depending on the recipe, but still keep them really kind of very small batch. And that works because frankly, there's just enough of us to kind of churn them out without getting kind of tired and exhausted and tuckering your palate out.
So to that end, you guys have Decadence, you have your 10-year, you have your Rise Paradigm. Are you looking to, you know, without tiring yourself out, expand that core portfolio? Have there thoughts about, there have been other experiments? I know you guys have the heirloom line as well. You know, what's next for Widow Jane? Do you guys have any kind of upcoming plans?
Yeah, every year we have the vaults, which is fun, and that's always different, which is great to have something that people are kind of waiting for and has some consistency, but then has some really crazy components. And so we have those barrels aging away. I've been tasting them. They're very yummy. We have another product in the future coming out probably this year that's going to be kind of almost a vaults extreme, I guess, kind of playing with some older whiskeys and different finishing on that one as well, which is super fun and exciting. And then, Baby Jane is probably going to be coming out too, which is kind of amazing. We're going to have that product dropping finally, something that we've been working on forever. But yeah, the final of age stuff is going to be with its own bottle, and all this good stuff is coming out, which is kind of, I'm like selling it short a little bit here, but that's just, it's like so exciting that I'm kind of like numb to it now. Like, I don't even know, it's too much emotions that I'm shutting down. It's very, very.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just going to lower expectations and then hopefully overperform.
Yeah, I'm a little scared too. You know, it's my child going into the world. But everyone I've had try it so far has had some really lovely things to say about it, which is really fun. And I think it really has a place in our portfolio, which I think is cool. I think it's fun to be able to put something out there that fits in a way that in the way it is. And I think that's really cool.
And we always love to end our interviews with something lighthearted, fun. So, and I'm normally better at these, like coming up with questions. This season, I've been throwing them around. I know you're a baker, so I was trying to think of a really like punny baker's question, but I have failed at that. So I'm gonna go back to a core one that we did for season 1. If you could have a pour of Widow Jane vaults with anyone dead or alive, who would it be?
Maybe can I make it a bit tender? It won't be as funny. I don't know. I think I would love to. I have a couple of aunts that I never got to really meet, and so it would have been really cool to like have a drink with them. And I feel like I really would have got along with them, and I think they really would have appreciated it. I think they would be really proud of me being this in a somewhat. No, all I know about them being in a kind of like in this industry, kind of a little bit of a rebellious streak, kind of not following a more normal route or path. And so I think being able to sit down and have a glass of whiskey and share stories with them would be lovely. Yeah.
That is perfect. That is, there's nothing sappy and sweet and sincere is always appreciated. Well, Sienna, thank you so much for taking out the time to do this. Really appreciated it. Like I said, I have become an even bigger fan having seen those beautiful minds and the care that you and your team give to this product. Is definitely it's something that's very unique, and hopefully folks can get out to Red Hook and get to see at least a part of the experience, if not obviously the minds itself. But no, it's been a pleasure. So thank you so much for your time. Cheers.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.